Very punctual. So hi everyone. While everyone is gathering, I'll just do a bit of an intro to the webinar series. So really happy to have you all here on our second session of executive webinar series following our Outlook report, focusing on changes in the sustainability field. As we called it, end of sustainability as we knew it. Because the field is changing. And in the first webinar, we explored the shift itself, and we'll reference that a little bit today. But today we are focusing on commercializing sustainability, on showing the money, and with a very particular focus on metals industry. And I have a fantastic panel today exactly for this topic. So first, I'm joined by Hugo Brody, leading sustainability and physical markets development at London Metal Exchange, essentially responsible for all the sustainability initiatives within the London Metal Exchange and the physical markets, pushing the sustainability premia that we were going to discuss today and aligning with incentives across the metal exchange. Hugo, thanks so much for joining us today after the intense LME week.
Yeah, thank you very much. Pleasure to be here, and good to have got LME week done now.
Yeah, I hope you had enough time to recover.
Fully recovered.
All of the receptions during the long nights. And we're also joined today by Felix Schmitz, who is before led investor relations and was heading all of the sustainability initiatives and transformation at Kloeckner Group. And in my view, actually pushed a revolutionary and pioneering approach across the steel industry. And since October, I think 2023, Felix is CEO of Kloeckner Metals Germany. And I think Felix can share a unique perspective on actually pushing universal, or let's say universally accepted approach across a certain metal, delivering win-wins for different parts of the value chain, and very practically sharing how companies and how sustainability teams can do that. Thank you, Felix, for being here today with us.
Thanks for having me. I think that was the best intro I ever get. And I think that is now the moment to leave the room, because it cannot get any better.
Cool. So, guys, let's start while everyone's still gathering. We can pull the poll on who is in the room now and keep it for a little bit in the chat so people can start responding. And we also understand where they are. So sustainability and procurement and finance. Oh, it's really cool, because on the previous webinar we didn't have that many people from finance and commercial. Oh, thanks guys. Really happy to see you here. So that also will help us to tailor the discussion, but I see that mostly it's sustainability teams. So very practical, focusing on making sustainability commercial. Well, if that makes sense. I think here, while you keep voting, I think here I want to give a bit of a background on the discussion. So with our Outlook report, we looked at sustainability maturity. And many people consider what's happening now in sustainability as a divergence from. However, we actually see that as a development in sustainability. It's not like sustainability becomes, or ESG or whatever, ESG now is a bad word, so sustainability is becoming less important. We don't see that. And actually during the discussions during the LME week, during FT mining and Metal Summit, we heard that it's not about feeling that sustainability is less important. It's actually focusing. It's actually understanding what's practical, tangible, and important for the business, and making it very commercial, right? So that's why we wanted to discuss that today. And this shift is affecting everyone in the field. Of course, that means that it's harder to get budgets because that's not the moral discussion, like we have to do that because everyone is doing that. It's really building the business case. And it's a big question how to do that. And it's a big cultural shift for the players. So first, I want to ask both of you, and maybe Felix, starting with you, how do you see that shift from your vantage point? And do you feel it in general?
So first of all, I think sustainability is growing up. It's a bit sad because saying this after knowing about climate change now for decades, that it's going to evolve in that direction, that we can now say it's growing up. But I mean it rather relatively speaking to what we experienced in the last 5 years. So at the beginning of the 20s, there was a big rush. Nobody could speed up enough. And then you could see that there is a rational movement behind it now taking place, which is good. So the topics are more objective right now, and people are focusing on the right things. So negatively, you could say still not enough commercial people in this call. Positively saying there are commercial people in this room now, and this is certainly a good one. On the other hand, I think lots of people are also here in this call defining themselves as pioneers, maybe pioneer in their team, maybe pioneer in the company, maybe in the industry, maybe in the value chain, whatever. But pioneering means that you do something for the first time, or you are among the ones who are doing it for the first time. It does not necessarily mean that hundreds of followers are directly behind you and herding to the island where you are now at. So it might take some time, and I think the good thing, and that is something I'm focusing on right now, is to have an objective discussion on topics, but also doing and leading this discussion. It's about leadership. It is very easy for people to follow one or two topics. It is very difficult for humankind to follow more than 3 topics. So it's up to leadership that you do not get loose of sustainability pathways and all these kind of related things.
And Hugh, what's your perspective? And also maybe reflecting on this topic of focusing, or like choosing 1 or 2 topics that are important.
Yeah. So as I saw, there are a lot of sustainability professionals on the call. Maybe some very quickly on 1 or 2 sentences on the LME. So we're the world's largest futures exchange for base metals. So I guess where I'm particularly focused are in the aluminium, copper, nickel, lead, and zinc value chains, because that metal can be physically delivered into one of our warehouses to settle against one of the futures contracts. And that's why we, as the LME, we operate a brands list where producers of metal register with us. So I guess that's the framing where we're looking at this. So when it comes to sustainability, I agree with Felix. I think the topic has been around for many years. I do think that there has now been a shift from intent, saying we're going to be net zero by 2050, to having to actually prove that in a measurable framework. And the way at the LME we're looking at this, we had a choice. We could either bake sustainability thresholds into our brand listing requirements, so all of our metal producers have to be following exactly the same framework, or we could say, this is the LME brand listing requirement. What are you doing to differentiate yourself within our brands list? And that's why we're looking at having an optional premier price. I'm sure we're going to talk about this a bit more in a bit, and looking at where can companies that produce metal differentiate themselves, not just on emissions, but in broader frameworks. So, for example, in aluminium, the ASI performance standard is a standard that incorporates a lot of different sustainability metrics, and one which consumers know very well. So it's we're looking at how we can use broad standards, but also that incorporate emissions as well.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and from our perspective, so I haven't introduced myself. So for those who don't know me, CEO and one of the founders of beSirius, and before that, I was head of sustainability at Eurasian Resources Group. So essentially, my entire life in metals and mining. And from our perspective, building AI solutions for the metals and mining value chain, supporting sustainability and commercial teams. What we see a lot, of course, this budget pressure and this pressure on building the commercial business case. Also, a lot of interest in AI right now, but also this desire of sustainability people to be connected to commercial and sustainability and procurement teams. And the desire to really demonstrate to the management this tangible value. And this is where those sustainability premiums or value of sustainability data actually comes in play. So Hugo, following up on what you just mentioned and how you described the LME role in the metal market, what was the trigger for LME to start thinking about or like to start experimenting with sustainability premiums? And can you give us a bit of the background on that?
Yes, so very originally at the LME, back in 2019, I mean, for 148 years, we never looked at ethical thresholds for our brands. It was, it was only metallurgical, and you had to meet the metallurgical threshold, and then you would be considered part of the LME price. And then in 2019, we implemented as part of our rules our first ethical thresholds, which were mitigating against the worst forms of child labor and conflict minerals. And we felt at the time these were pretty uncontroversial. All companies should be looking to mitigate against.
I was one of the experiment cases. I remember we were running.
I remember. Yeah, I remember well. From one of your sites in Africa, and even then, and we looked at implement this across all of our metal categories: nickel, aluminium, copper. So all brands had to at least do some due diligence, the minimum level of due diligence we felt for human rights and child labor. But we realized there was this whole spectrum of different sustainability indicators from across different metal categories that weren't necessarily one size fits all, particularly emissions. And it didn't feel like the market was ready then. It doesn't feel like the market's ready now either, to have a single emissions methodology that can be used across aluminium, nickel, copper, or lead. So instead of having this as a mandatory requirement, the other sustainability categories, instead what the LME is looking at now is creating a framework by which, if there is commercial value in conforming to a standard that has lots of different sustainability indicators, be that the ASI, be that the copper mark, you can discover that commercial value on a spot trading platform, and we can start producing a price that shows the incremental value above the LME for complying with one of these standards. So I guess a really good case study is nickel. There are some producers in the world that are produced to a much, we say, lower standard than other producers when it comes to emissions. But at the LME, if we were to say, we're going to we're going to have this emissions threshold, and we're going to just cut off 80% of the world's nickel production as being an LME brand listed product, then our contract becomes less representative of the market. But we still wanted an avenue for those producers that are going above and beyond to show commercial value. And we think it's via our sustainability premier framework, our spot trading platform, that they can do this. And it's all right, there's a few different levers to this, but I can unpack that a bit more later.
Yeah, and I think all of the time. It's like a really good bridge to steel. So also during LME week, there were a lot of discussions that, for aluminium, the market is much more ready because there's been a lot of discussions about green aluminium, also because for aluminium, I would say carbon is much more important and more relevant than, well, relatively, with a lot of disclaimers, than for many other commodities, and the same for steel. So here, Felix, I would like your perspective on Do you feel already, because I would say, again, still market on this green premium or carbon premium is more mature, definitely, than some of the other markets. And especially with the work that you've been doing since, I think, 2020, or maybe even 2019. Maybe you can also tell us a little bit more about that, because I have a lot of background and the listeners probably not. Tell us how you guys approach that. Do you feel that green premium already working and sticking in and so on? So just, from very basics to more details.
Yeah. So you gotta interrupt me if it goes too far. You will know when the right time will be. First, I would like to reference to what Hugo said. It's very, very important to get it into metrics. So there was a time, and that is not 20 years ago, that is maybe 6 years ago, when we were writing everything down in words and said, this is a sustainability report. I didn't say that at the beginning. Before I joined Kloeckner, I was professionally socialized in banking. So I used to be a banker. Sorry for that. And then I went to industry, and I was head of investor relations. So I was in charge of all the capital market guys and capital market story and being in discussions with the capital market side all day long. And it's very important that you filtrate the essence of it into metrics. It doesn't have to be uncomplicated or undercomplex. No, it can be complex, but it has to be rationalized. And that is very important, that we now fade in such a phase where we get away from neutral storytelling, even worse, greenwashing. I mean, this is not neutral, this is even worse, and your reputation is at risk if you do these kind of things and you go to this metric side of the equation. Coming back to your question, we are a listed company. This is very important to understand, because the pressure of capital markets is on our shoulders, and that keeps us moving a bit quicker than others. On the other hand, we're not producing anything. We are in the metals industry, and that is less weight on our shoulders. Also important, because already in the 2010s, everybody knew in metal industry you have to transform your business model. Everybody already had this kind of CCF topics on the table, and this kind of metrics were evolving, though the commercial side was not there. And if you are talking about billions of dollars in an under pressure industry to transform your business model, this is no easy task. And we are on the value chain downstream from the metals industry. We're distributing, we're processing material, and we are somewhat like a trader, and therefore very close to our customers. We have around 100 main suppliers, but we have 100,000 customers. We sense everything right from the beginning. And in 2020, something changed. We felt this, and it started in Germany. I'm sitting in our headquarters in Germany, and it started in Germany, and that was a flooding in the center of Germany. It was, we call it in Germany, the Ahrtal catastrophe. There was a big river going straight through Western Germany. Lots of people lost their lives, and lots of steel processing companies were right in the middle of this. And that was the first time that metal industry got in touch with climate change very intensely in the Western markets. And that was also the time when the first greener goods, green steel, very infantile, came to the market. And we were making up the question, is it about a CCF topic? Is it about switching off the light at night, feeling good, going to bed a bit nicer and more comfortable, or is there a business model in it? And that was when everything changed for us. So that was when we looked at the metrics and we asked ourselves, what is the carbon content of the product? Back then, I didn't know the word product carbon footprint. So forgive me, everybody knew back then, I didn't know. So in 2020, and after we got to see the different kind of potential behind the decarbonization of metal compared to others, we found out that there is a business model. And we are talking about commercialization today. If you're talking about commercialization, it means also marketing. And marketing, in the pure definition of the word, does not mean green slides. And it does not mean fancy
My
story.
favorite is the world in like into hands. You have like the green earth ball and then a
That will
small
make,
tree on top
yes.
of it.
I'm convinced if you simply have enough slides with this nice picture, you will change everything. That's for sure. And maybe you do it something differently. And we decided to do it differently. The point is, marketing means building a market. And building a market is very important in that circumstances, because nobody out there knows about the opportunities of sustainability initiatives. At least not in steel. Back then, nobody really knew that there is a potential. And that means education. That means talking to your customer. And that means, of course, bringing the know-how of the sustainability people, who all know this kind of things, to the commercial side and convince them internally in your company. That was the moment when we saw that there is an opportunity commercially, because I bring it down to the opportunity. The decarbonization potential in steel and metal, especially steel, is in no relation to the price increase if you decarbonize the good. And the price increase at the point of the end product is very low, but everybody thinks it would be high. And if you solve this and tell your customer that the decarbonization potential of her product is big, but you don't pay the price for it as much, then you have a business model. And that is basically what we saw back then, or what we realized, and everything that followed that trend. And I know I'm talking a lot about carbon, but I think every industry has to be real about their own impact. So some have no problem with carbon so much. Everybody has a problem with sustainability. Everybody has an impact. But in steel, it is carbon. The big thing is carbon. And if I would focus on the same, on this with the same engagement on different metric, for instance, that has a different kind of impact, I would waste time. There are different elephants in the room, but one is bigger. And in steel, we have to be real there. By the way, you talked about metal and aluminum. This is sort of, I want to be a bit cautious here, because there might be aluminum guys in the room, or girls. But aluminum,
There definitely are.
yeah, and we are buying lots of aluminum, and we're selling lots of aluminum. But the point is, aluminum was very early to commercialize the use of a greener good. However, it was sort of a greenwashing tactic, because everybody was talking about recycling. What nobody knows, I will not pop up the slide right here, because there are so many aluminum people here, but the impact of aluminum in terms of carbon, and that was not the metric everybody mentioned, is relatively to steel most of the time higher. So, and lots of people realize now that some products and raw materials that go into end products seemed to be more sustainable than they really are. You have this very famous example of an electric vehicle, one of the most selling electric vehicles in the world at the beginning. And it was almost fully made of carbon fiber. And the focus was, of course, having it very sustainably running in the use phase. But the problem was nobody was looking at the production phase. And if you look at the product carbon footprint, and that was the game changer, at least in the industry, if you commercialize something, bring it into a metric where an end consumer may be able to choose between options, everybody now found out, oh, wait, maybe it's not that green, and we have to change something in the product assembly. There's still some way to go, because if you as an end consumer are not able to choose between these kind of more sustainable, less sustainable goods, and have a price tag to it, it will be difficult. It will be difficult to market. But this is
So
my
essentially, so if I understand you correctly, what you're saying is there are several points. First, really understanding the business case that is specific to your industry, to your value chain, and to the end consumer, because in the end, the end consumer defines how valuable certain sustainability initiatives are. And if they are not valuable to the end consumer, they will not survive. That's one of the outcomes, at least if I understood you correctly. Is that a correct like summary of this?
Yes, yes. And I would.
Do you feel that the end customers of still I don't know, like buyers of cars, are they ready to pay that? Is it much to pay? Or like, yeah, what is your experience with this?
Yes, we know this. So there are studies out there, and we know this it of course is different from industry to industry. But there are so many value chain pieces in between that have to be sort of convinced or have to buy into it. I will give you an example. So there was, in the beginning of these 2020s, there was the kind of reflection that there is a greener good. Let's call it green steel. Then everybody was asking the question, what is green steel? We were asking ourselves the question. We used to be, or we are still among the first SBTi-approved companies who run through these now a bit older standards, but we were proud about this. And that gave us a certain sense of greenwashing. And when we talked to our suppliers back then, we got scope 1 to 2 emissions, and everybody said this is a green good. Then of course everybody knew scope 1 and 2 is not the right wording if you talk about PCFs. This was a genesis. We evolved, and then we found out, oh well, we have 200,000 products in our stock, and every product has a different PCF, for instance. But what is a greener good? We made this journey, and we were building a path, and I can show you this. I have this kind of slide, and what we built is this kind of categorization. It was more or less for ourselves. We were awarded for this, but it was basically something we did for ourselves. We simply organized the CO2 reduced product good world in the surrounding of steel. We also did this for stainless and for aluminum. And we found out that there is a path. It is not green or gray. There is something in between, different shades of green. And we then realized, okay, it's good to have a very green good at stock and sell it to your customer. This is marketing. Might be nice, but it's not enough. The problem is, it will simply not be enough. A customer will ask for every kind of product carbon footprint of metric to decide what kind of greenish good he or she wants to buy. And the problem is that if you want to have this all certified, it takes a lot of time. So we said, if you do not want to endure 3 climate changes, you have to have a systematic approach. And that is something we basically did. We built an algorithm together with BCG and with TÜV, a German certifier, to have for all our 200,000 products, CAVID 95%, a PCF following ISO standard 14067, referencing to ISO 14044 and 4040. So this is
essentially establishing your own framework.
Not so much. The problem is, of course, the own frameworks are marketing-wise always a problem, because if you are working with Volkswagen, with Audi, Siemens, and Johnson Controls, and all these great companies out there, everybody wants to have an objective footprint, of course. And the most objective footprint out there, we're not just talking about carbon, right? And the most objective one was this one, and was developing. But having no footprint at all is
that was a start,
inferior.
Right? It was something to start with.
It was more than a start, because the day we switched on this algorithm, we found out so much more about our customers than they would know about themselves. We were pretty surprised. You could have anticipated. And then we brought it all together, and we had a system around it, a software system where we brought all these PCFs together, telling our customer, well, this is your footprint you sourced at Kloeckner last year. By the way, there is the same article sourced somewhere else, which is posing a greener alternative for you. Why don't you switch?
This is amazing, and
now we talk about
I
money,
actually want
and you're talking.
to dive into this at the after asking something from Hugo on this, like on identifying first the principles, because the topic that Felix just touched on, really connecting that to your customer and actually selling that data is super important, and I think like the essence of this discussion. But before that, Felix mentioned that there was nothing, and also everyone wants information like either standardized or in their own way. So how does your approach, LME approach right now with sustainability premium fits into this? How do you, and I saw you smiling, so I think you want to comment on that.
No, I mean, a lot of what Felix said resonated with our experience. So I guess fragmentation of definitions, each customer having a slightly different desire and a slightly different indicator that they want from their products is something we certainly heard when we look at our markets. I guess what we really want to do is to be able to generate an independent and trusted price above the LME price for sustainability. So for us, and I guess I diverge a bit from Felix's view here, is carbon is not just, I mean, I know there are a lot of different indicators, but just because something is produced in a low carbon environment, it does not mean it's responsibly produced in our view. So there's many different indicators, but I agree.
Talk about copper or any like
different... Copper, exactly. So water usage in copper is incredibly important and might not have the same, steel and aluminum. They're one of the World Economic Forum's hard to abate sectors when it comes to emissions. So certainly there's a higher lens or focus on emissions when it comes to those two metal categories. But in order to have an independent price that's, we think, is strongly verified and be able to be referenced by those in the market, like Felix and others, you need to at least have some threshold, even if it's not as far as some would like to go, where liquidity can pool around the same threshold. So we have published a threshold per metal, in our recent roadmap paper. And we said that for a metal to be considered sustainable, it must be under this emissions threshold per ton, and it also must have this one standard, and these standards have to be multidimensional and, crucially, and I agree with Felix's points before, measurable. So it has to be the standard has to have an independent auditor who goes and assesses the site to make sure it meets that threshold. So what we published has probably not gone as far as some, and I know there's definitely been cases in the past of ultra low carbon aluminum getting a premium price, 0 or 0.5 tons of CO2 per ton of aluminum produced. But what we're looking to do is to at least be able to provide some initial price signals for those who currently have no commercial incentive to take that first step. So what we've seen, and what's been a little bit discouraging over the last few years, is that for those who don't necessarily have access to hydropower, who are reliant on their state grid system, and who are meeting a higher level of sustainability and other indicators, they're not getting any short-term commercial incentive to do this. It's just a regulatory thing, or just a good feeling, a moral feeling for those working in the company. What we're trying to provide by having this independent pricing mechanism is a commercial incentive for those who they might not necessarily have access to hydropower to take that first step. There may not be a sustainable premium for a while. I personally believe there probably is, but what we want to do is at least provide the tools by which it can be discovered via the spot trading platform. So real transactions aggregated and then published in the price. So so I'll probably stop there.
No, but it's a really cool bridge to our poll on what drives sustainability decisions today in your company for our audience. And I also encourage the audience to ask questions in the chat, because we'll come back to them. So we can keep it in the chat so people have time to read and respond, and then pull out the results. But customer and supply chain pressure. So surprisingly, I think for a long time, regulatory pressure was the biggest motivator, but it's very unsustainable in my view, or it cannot work in isolation. Yeah, in isolation, and because businesses do not exist for compliance, they exist for revenue, and if we cannot show the revenue, like our functions will always be on, like, let's just do the minimum viable, whatever will get us through the compliance line, and then let it be. So this, like, having the ability to build the business case is critical, and the way we build the platform was always like that. So I of course come from very, very specific environment. There, every time I would bring the initiative, that would always the question, like, how do we get the money back? How do we get 3x, 5x on top of that? But I think every sustainability person needs to shift to that perspective. And it's a tough discussion, and not everyone was ready to have it. And I think now we are ready to have that, but also instruments are not yet there. And it's not always straightforward. And so, Hugo, following up on what you said, and then shifting to Felix, how you guys build that internal. So it's pretty much even all different brand, customer, regulatory, and regulatory pressure, and business value. So pretty much, well, while customer and business value could be the same. So I would say it's still winning. So Hugo, for you, the question would be, how do you see companies building win-wins with let's assume, sustainability premium works for some commodities or for all? How do you see companies can use that? You already touched on that, but maybe a bit deeper.
Yeah. So I guess it depends on where you are in the value chain. If you are a producer, then you can, if there is a reference price that's been independently assessed and based on transactions, you can say to your customer, look, don't just take my word for it in our long-term procurement contract. Look at this price that's been assessed basis these sustainability credentials, and then the customer, being a good customer, to say that's fair enough. You've got an independent price signal that we can then use in our long-term procurement contracts, not just this kind of opaque market where we're just adding value depending on what it is. If you're a customer, on the other hand, same sort of the counter applies. It's not just a producer saying, look, even if I'm producing with ultra low carbon, and I'm just saying, well, look, this is the price we're giving to our long-term procurement contract, and the customer is like, well, where have you got that from? They can say, well, look, here again is an independent price. We're not pulling the wool over your eyes. These are based on real world transactions. So that's where we want to go. And then I guess from an investor point of view, if you're in the capital markets, if you're looking at long-term investments and you want to make sure you get some return from companies acting responsibly, again, an independent price signal that's been discovered can help you make that decision, because you know that sustainability is not going away. There's actually real world transactions that I can base long-term investment decisions on. So, I mean,
I was recently talking to, so sorry for interrupting, but it was just like, I was recently talking to, on Friday, to a large metal producing company with a commodity that is not traded at LME, but they mentioned, then I asked, what do you think about sustainability premium? Is it there? And they said, well, we were looking at how we are going to strategically position our metals, and we are one of the largest producers of this particular metal. If I say, everyone will understand
which company? Tell me. No, I'm joking.
Yeah. So for us, it was a decision whether we only try to be, efficient on the cost curve and just work on, on the become successful because we are lower cost, and we are lower cost because we have better resources, or do we also get some extra because we are also the most sustainable? And we intentionally putting effort on identifying the sustainability premium, and having a reference always would be valuable, but we will judge how we're going to use it. It will be our decision, it will be our negotiation, but it's always good to have the reference. So at least to know that it exists, and that's also referencing your discussion, your at LME seminar. Like, does it exist? Does it not? Like what's happening there? Yeah,
that's an important point. Sorry to cut you back off in turn, but that's how the LME price works today. If we take away sustainability, right? So the LME price is the price of the worst brand in the worst location because it's a market of last resort, and then people use the LME price in long-term procurement contracts. So LME plus 10% because of our better production methods, and that's what we want to get to in sustainability as well. So it's like the LME price, then the LME sustainability premium price, and then because I'm going even further with using kind of hydropower, I can then base my extended premium on that price as well. So it's sort of layered on top, but yeah, sorry.
No, super cool. And Felix, so I cut you off on discussing like how you use those PCFs and those evaluations to actually enrich customer communication, customer discussions, and maybe even shift their decisions towards greener products. So could you walk us through that? How you created those wins using your newly obtained data? How you extended this knowledge to your customers and whether they saw the value of this data?
Well, first of all, that fits pretty well to what you just said, Hugo. The metric, and you're right, by the way, it could be broader. It could be way broader. It has to be broader. Right now, we are happy that we have objective data in the surrounding of carbon, and it should be moving faster. But if you have this metric, you can rationalize the discussion. I think that is something like the title of my first 2 sentences. And now it is on us to bring it to the customer, to bring it to the market, and we are not bringing the products to the market. So the LME is doing everything they can. They put a price premium onto aluminum and different kind of other products, but this is not the go-to-market. You cannot do anything else. No offense here, but we're
not traders. You're right. We could just give the framework. Yeah.
That is the task of the OEM in the end. How many green cars do you see in the market? None. You see electrified vehicles, but is it a green car? I don't know. So basically not. So we are not bringing it to the market. The question will be answered very oftenly from the customer of the customer of the customer. We start talking from time to time on management basis with the customers of our customers about these kind of topics. And regulation, we started to talk about regulation. Always if regulation starts to kick in, people mistrust the consumer. This is basically the reason why we have regulation, because we're mistrusting the consumer and we see anomalies in the value chains. And if we would bring it with a verified metric to the market and people could decide, we know already today, even under deprioritized circumstances, and we know that sustainability is a bit deprioritized right now, they would buy certain things. We know, for instance, that I have a few numbers here and I will run through them. They are very, very easy. So 84% of consumers are stating that they are willing to pay an extra premium for a greener car, whatever a greener car is, CO2 reduced. 88% of EV consumers state they would do so. 94% of appliance customers state they would pay for this kind of greener washing machine, dryer, whatever. In Japan, they would be willing to pay a margin of 4,500 euros, forgive me, I'm sitting in Germany, euros, for a greener car. This is way more than you would have to place in terms of cost to make it whatever green is. I'm not talking details right now, but at least there are signals from consumers that they would pay for it. And that is basically something we are looking for. The question is, who is bringing the product to them? We see this, of course. We see customers on our end building these CO2 reduced products now and bringing it to the market. It will certainly get tailwinds if it's prioritized again. And the good thing is you're solving 2 kinds of problems. I mean, everybody has in the listed company surrounding the net zero targets on the table, and the longer you wait to really develop and evolve on that path, the harder it gets. And at the same time, you could secure a margin contributor to your P&L. If you solve both things at once, this is certainly a win-win situation. But you have to develop it. And if you want to develop, you have to be fact-based. That is the second slide I have, and it will be the last one. But if I talk about decarbonization potential, for instance, and matching this with price increases and talking about a mispriced world, this is basically what it looks like in steel. So the decarbonization potential for a car through the procurement of CO2 reduced material, green steel, would be 23%. The price uptick is 0.7. So Hugo, Anastasia, are you going to buy a car that costs you 0.7% more and it is decarbonized by a quarter?
I'm a bike person. So I'll buy a bike.
Okay. Would you buy an offshore wind park, Anastasia, that would be decarbonized by 83% if it just costs you 5.5% more? So this is basically the business model, but you have to talk about the facts and you have to talk about the metrics. You asked us how we are currently, and this is of course not over. It hasn't even really started. How we are trying to market it. We have a CO2 reduced goods sales force. We established it 3 years ago, putting very young people into groups, educating them about the really details of it, talking about ESRS, reporting standards, talking about, of course, PCF standards, the ISO standards. In steel, we have less standard. We have so many standards, and trying to educate them for the sake of educating our customers and the customers of our customers. And that is something that goes along now for quite some time. What we basically see right now is that the willingness to buy greener goods is not very high right now, because everybody's looking, at least in Europe, for restructuring potential and saving costs. But what has not been erased is the interest and the willingness to pay for data points. And these are, of course, overlapping business models, but they are not necessarily the same. And this goes on, and this is also the optimism that comes from my business world view here, that the topic might be deprioritized, but it's not true that nobody is taking care anymore. There are lots of people taking care. They have to take care because their business might be at stake in the future if they don't turn and don't transform.
No, that's actually I think that's a very important point on finding those win-wins together with the customer, monetizing the data, and really using the data to create this business case. We're also sharing the roadmap on understanding how to capture the data that you have in the company, and then using that to build those business cases. But something that was mentioned in the chat, and I think is really cool to reflect on, and builds bridge to our last question on practical ways to implement those approaches, is that the perfect frameworks don't exist. You need to start somewhere. I'm roughly summarizing. Wow, this is the technology. So yeah, thank you, Irina, for sharing this. And Hugo, I wanted to reflect a little bit on the frameworks. So you mentioned that you are going with a voluntary approach this time versus the responsible sourcing framework that you established several years ago. So, and you approach it more like Alice last week on Triland panel mentioned that you guys approaching it in an experimental way. So can you give us a bit of a perspective why you decided to do that, and how you think that approach supports the implementation, the practical implementation of this?
Yeah, and I guess just taking one step back to answer Felix's question, would I buy that car and invest in that wind turbine for that level? I think I would, as long as I know that children haven't been used in assembling that car, or an indigenous community has not had their water siphoned off so that the copper can be so I agree that the green, the sort of the emissions part is definitely crucial, particularly in steel and aluminium, but you do need to have at least some minimum threshold. And I guess the experimentation part that you're talking about in a stage that when we change the brands list, that kind of requires a consultation with all of our market. We're a regulated exchange, so we have to go out to a vast array of people, and it can take months and months or even years. And then changing the rule book and the requirements for each metal is a very long process. Whereas this is a constantly evolving market. Different sustainability indicators are becoming more important. Some are becoming more measurable, and we want to be market led rather than just say this is a mandatory rule for everyone. So if there is massive amounts of liquidity and more agreement in the future that is demonstrated by trading on that platform, then we can look to have the new ethical threshold across all our brands embedded and have a consultation. But at the very first stage, we need to see real transactions based on the thresholds we publish. And once we see transactions, once there's a regular premium being published, then we can start looking at the more arduous job of having the consultation and building into our rule book. So that's why we call it experimentation. It's more, we can be more flexible now with the evolving market. So.
Yeah, and Felix, what was the approach for you because I know there was pushback. I'll hide the poll results for now. I know there was a pushback, then you started implementing that. We also heard it from different steel producers because, well, they suddenly were evaluated, right? And how did you overcome that? What are the practical steps on doing that? Did you also do a bit of experimentation or like adjustment and flexibility throughout the process? Or what are the steps that you recommend others to do in their industries now?
So first of all, we experience tailwinds. So you were showing this beautiful slope at the beginning of our session here. 10 years ago, I think it would have been very difficult for us to achieve the level of quantity of data supply we wanted to achieve, and that would have been very, very difficult back then. This is different now. We are talking about quality way more often. There are also data points that we simply did not integrate because even if they were following certain standards, it was not enough. It is simply not enough because we're talking about products. If we're talking commercial, we're talking about products. If we're talking about products, we're talking about consistency and complement data points. The pushbacks we received were rather in terms of timing, so that somebody didn't want to give us the data really. I do not recall that something like this happened. I mean, that would basically mean that you say, well, we are in steel and metal, but we don't think that climate change is a big topic, so please don't talk with us anymore. And that there were certainly no player on our side, no partner on our side anymore in the future. The timing, that is something where we received pushback in terms of how long does it take to build it up. And the answer was always clear. I mean, we can really see how long it would take to bring these kind of different data points together to have a sufficient setup. And on the other hand, there's also the timing that you cannot choose that comes from the climate change transformation objective. And there you better move. And the people and the companies that will need a decade to put their numbers together will not be there in 10 years' time or 5 years' time. And I think we can complain about this or simply say that this is just another fragment of the new market. And I'm a very big supporter of pricing all this in. This is why I like the LME approach so much. We are a company, a listed company in this competitive landscape. We are not a standard setter. That was never our objective. I don't want to set standards. But what I want to have is a commercializable model where customers can rely on, and they will come back to me if they bear reputational risk or reputational risk hit their business model, vice versa. And therefore, I have to bring a few assurance steps into play, and then I can push back myself. And that happened pretty often. I would say that everybody realized now, however, and that is a bit pessimistic in terms of what you said, Hugo, I don't think. It is, of course, right what you're saying. We should implement the whole ESG components into the metric, and still people are very much focused on the carbon side, especially if it goes back to the consumer. So if they will pay for it, and if they want to distinguish between sustainable and non-sustainable goods, more sustainable, less sustainable goods, they will most likely in the near term focus on that component. And it is on us, of course, to make them ready and to bring them into this educational game on the other end. But I think that might take even more time.
Yeah. And a quick follow-up on this. There was a question on the chat on unfair competition because somebody has lower CBAM over or like not lower CBAM, like according to CBAM benchmarks, the performance would be lower because different materials, different ore inputs and so on. Do you feel that this is actually an unfair competition or not? Because the question is like, how do you feel about this unfair competition? I would transform it a little bit and say, is it unfair, or carbon actually becomes part of like, yeah, well, that's life. You have access to hydropower and aluminum, and that's why you have lower footprint.
I mean, the other way would be, should we support business models that emit lots of carbon just because we say it's an unfair game? So, I mean, you could also unload it into the direction that you say, is it fair that every country should participate in this, though the industrialized countries emitted all these kind of CO2 in the past? The problem with CBAM, and I think we need 3 different other sessions for this.
There are lots of problems with CBAM. Let's agree on this.
It's not spot on. It's not spot on. And it's, of course, very difficult to compare on CBAM regulations.
And it's very, I think it's not supporting the current European goal of becoming more competitive, at least in the way it is structured now. So that's for sure. And Hugo, you wanted to reflect on that. And then on top of that, I wanted to add one question on which voluntary sustainability standards does LME recognize in the mining and refining spaces? I would assume for the sustainable premium. So I'm also extending the question a little bit, but you also wanted to reflect on something Felix said.
I can't remember what I wanted to reflect on. I was distracted by the CBAM comment because we have mandated all of our producers have to give their emissions basis because of the CBAM regulation, because you can be randomly allocated a warrant in Europe, for example, and telling a producer in Indonesia or China that they have to do something because of European regulation is a very difficult phone call that we had to make. And so I agree, we could have so many conversations on CBAM and the difficulties of it. But that was my next reflection. I can't remember what I was reflecting on before. Sorry.
Sorry for interrupting you. Okay, so maybe you can quickly share on the sustainability standards that you support for sustainable premium, and then we can do a very quick lightning round. And I ask everyone to stay for this because it will be fun, but it will take us only 1 minute. So Hugo, go ahead.
Yeah. So really quickly, and I'm agreeing with Felix. Carbon is much more measurable now. So all of our thresholds have a carbon threshold basis. The methodology that's being created by a particular standard in their metal category. So it's the ASI in aluminium, that performance standard, which has to be audited at their site, and then the IAI is their emissions methodology. Copper mark in copper, and the carbon methodology from the ICA. And then, nickel mark and zinc mark and similar in the other categories. So very quick, high level.
Cool. And more details can be found on LME website following the recent announcement. yeah.
Hope so.
Cool. Lightning round. Very quick. Hugo, let's start with you. Is green premium real or not?
Is green premium real or not? I personally believe that sustainable premium, as in a commercial, people are willing to pay, and that's shown by Felix's comments and then the McKinsey's comments in the recent LME seminar. People have indicated willingness to pay for a premium.
So yes.
So yes, but I can't comment personally.
Felix, is it real or not?
It is real, and we have to make it even more real.
Okay, Felix, what's the most overrated sustainability metric?
The most overrated metric. Oh, I knew that there was a risk that I wouldn't be able to answer that instantly. I wouldn't go out with a metric. I would take that green slide everybody knows and we were talking about. So I think that is part of the metric because we think it would solve the world problem and it will not. But for the metric, it takes me another hour or so to get to.
It's okay. It's okay. Yeah. Hugo?
Carbon offset. Is that a metric? It's something I don't know.
Yeah, I mean, like how many offsets you did. Okay, yeah. Hugo. If you can ban one meaningless sustainability cliche, what would that be?
Okay, but back to Felix's original answer, to saying you're going to be net zero by 2050 and then not doing anything about it. That's like.
Mine would be sustainability is in our DNA. It's like such a bullshit. Felix, yours?
Give me the next question. I need a better one.
So you don't have the cliche. Okay, so if you had 100K to invest in sustainability tech, what would that be?
Carbon capture. Very easy.
Hugo?
That's good. Felix, good one. I would say traceability. So I think being able to actually track the actual metal and then a label where you can scan and see the actual details related to that metal. That would be a.
Oh, I know. I know a great startup that is going to use that. Okay, and the last one. By 2026, the winners will be those who, in sustainability, of course,
can get a premium for their metal by doing good work.
Felix?
That's bad answer.
Who over prioritizing sustainability didn't erase the whole path. So keep it up.
Cool. Thank you, guys. That was super, super insightful. We also will capture this and we'll share with those who didn't manage to attend the recording. And thank you all for participating and for your questions. Yeah, it's pleasure having you here, and looking forward to speaking with you again maybe in 2026 and seeing how all of those ideas actually were reflected in the market.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you,
for having
guys.
me. Thank you. Bye, guys.